Hi everyone, I'm Jaspreet Singh. I'm Microsoft Identity and Security Engineer. Today I want to explain what is email authentication in plain English. If someone tries to send an email pretending to be you, that's a problem, right? That's why we need email authentication. Now I'll share my computer and I'll try to explain with slides. Let's hop on my computer now. Let's talk about what is email authentication. Email authentication is basically we use it to verify the ID verification for email. When email authentication happens, it performs three checks. First, it checks source of originating of the email. Let's say whether it checks whether email it's coming from, who is allowed to send the email. This means that we can specify the email server, that it's coming from the legitimate server or it's from the fake server. It checks whether the messages were altered along the way. It also checks what action can be taken if something doesn't check out. For instance, if some authentication fails, what action should it take in order to make sure that email does not enter into the receiver's mailbox. So let's talk about, there are three types of authentication protocol that we use. So let's talk about SPF. So what SPF stands for is Sender Policy Framework. So what SPF does, it's a security mechanism that prevents the bad guys from impersonating you as an email sender. So what it does is, in SPF you can specify the list of servers that are allowed to send emails for a particular domain. Let me try to explain you with an example as well. So let's talk about, let's say this is Mr. Bob. He is trying to send an email. Let's say bob at xyz.com. This is let's say Steve, right? And it's let's say Steve at abc.com. This person trying to send an email to Steve, they don't have an SPF record at the receiving email system server. That will ask for SPF record, whether it will perform the check, and it will say, give me the list of email servers that are allowed to send email from your xyz.com domain. If the email is mentioned in the SPF record, so what it will do, it will go DNS of XYZ and check SPF record. If it does exist, IP address is this one, is mentioned here. It's a 1.1.1.1, and this IP address is also mentioned here, 1.1.1.1. Both matches, it will let you in, and the email will be entered into the system. However, let's say here is somebody is trying to spoof the domain 2.2.2.2. Okay, and here is only one allowed. This means email will be blocked. When this domain will check here and the IP address doesn't match, SPF will fail. But we need to keep in mind that SPF alone is not enough. So let's talk about what is DKIM. DKIM is also another. What is DKIM? DKIM stands for Domain Keys Identified Mail. So DKIM has been created for the same purpose as SPF. It prevents the bad guys from impersonating you, from sending an email from your domain. So let's say, how does it work? I'll try to explain. Its purpose is to say to make sure that messages are not altered, along the way. So which means, so when you enable DKIM, what you do is, let's say you have activated DKIM here. So what it does is, so when you send an email, let's say this is your email message, hi, hello, 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 and here what DKIM will do, it will add a private key here, a small, on the header, and public key is already available on the server. And it so this is the receiver end. Let's say this is the receiver end and this is the receiver. It will check the DKIM, perform authentication, SPF record check is done, and now it will do DKIM. So what DKIM will do, it will check the public key. It will check the public key. Public key is available on the internet, and it will make sure the private key is already here, and it will, if the email is legitimate, it will let you enter into the inbox of the user. Otherwise, if the key doesn't match or messages are altered, this means DKIM authentication will fail. But it works on encrypting and decrypting keys to prevent the bad guys from impersonating you as a sender. So it protects message integrity, which I've already discussed, proves the message was not altered, add a digital signature to your emails. So let's talk about DMARC, the rule book. So what is DMARC? DMARC stands for Domain-Based Message Authentication Resource and Conformance Authentication Protocol. We use this DMARC to prevent the bad guys, to prevent the cyber criminals from phishing and spoofing of the domain. DMARC allows to control fail authentication protocols. Let's say DKIM and DKIM and SPF. If these authentication will fail, what action it should take to let the email come into the mailbox or reject the email. Which means check alignments with the front domain, so ties SPF and DKIM together. Yeah. So this means, this allows you to work along with DKIM and as well as SPF as well, Sender Policy Framework. This checks the list of allowed servers. This adds a digital signature on the message. Both ties together. If both authentication fails, what action it should take. So why DMARC matters? So why DMARC matters? As the first term it says, let's say you have enabled SPF and DKIM, still the email can enter into the mail, even though the authentications are failed. Both authentication protocols are failed. So SPF and DKIM do not allow what action it should take. But with with DMARC, you can define the action it should take when the authentication when something does not check out. Let's say some authentication fails, when somebody tries to spoof or phish, and it will not let the email enter into the mailbox. DMARC policies: P is equal to none. None means nothing, only monitoring. So you will get all alerts in the email address which you have defined while setting up the policy. You need to define it on the on your DNS. You need to add a DNS record into your DNS and let the policy decide what action it should take. Let's say none is nothing, no action, only monitoring. What as and who try to enter into the mailbox and all those sorts. All alerts will be entered. You will be getting via email. Quarantine. So suspicious email goes to junk, but you will be move the emails which were failed with SPF and DKIM authentications. They will be moved to quarantine folder. What is quarantine folder? Quarantine folder is a separate folder where a user can go request, release, and accept those emails. If he sees that it's a legitimate email, so it does not let the email directly enter into the mailbox. Reject email. If when you set up a reject policy in DMARC, everything which were failed to authenticate themselves in DKIM and SPF, they will be rejected. They won't be able to enter into the mailbox, user's mailbox. Having not all organizations activated this, or follow these protocols, authentication protocols to secure their email system. So how they work together? SPF, this will check who can send. It maintains a list of allowed mail servers, which means who can send the email from your domain. That's it. So it's a kind of a list where you have mentioned these are the IP addresses of the server that are allowed to send email from the particular domain only. If somebody is outside of the domain, that will treat mark this as SPF is equal to record is equal to SPF authentication fail. What is DKIM alter? What was it altered? Which means when the message was sent, somebody tried to DKIM authentication fail because it adds a private key. Public keys available on the internet, user end, or the globally. So when the message receives, is he able to encrypt the email? Decrypt the message. If he is able to do it, the message is not altered. However, if he's not able to decrypt the message using the public key, that means message has been altered, which means compromised, and it's not a legit email. So DMARC DMARC decides what should happen, which means whether it should allow the email to by you. If you set none, all emails will be allowed into the mailbox regardless whether authentication fails or not. Quarantine, it moves the email to the quarantine folder and it lets the user decide whether he wants the email to be released into the mailbox or not. Reject. Reject will reject the all as authentication failed and SPF and DKIM authentication failed emails to reject, and we won't be able to retrieve it. Missing one breaks the chain. If let's say you have not configured SPF or you have not configured the DKIM, then there is no point of using one. If one piece is missing, the chain is broken, and we won't be able to secure the email. Email authentication will not work properly the way it should work. Yeah, so it means this is a core strategy that we must follow with all three point strategy: SPF, DKIM, and third one is DMARC. We must follow these authentic practices together to secure our email system. Final takeaway: email authentication is simple but ignored. Many organizations still not enable these authentication protocols. I think awareness is the key. They are not concerned about authentication security. Most attacks exploit missing DMARC. Yeah, because as I again either the chain is broken. Some of them have not configured DKIM. Some of them have not configured SPF. They have not added the list of IP addresses, a list of allowed the exchange servers or email servers, which is mandatory. Yeah, but they have not. They've still not included the mail servers, which means emails can be sent from anywhere in the world without, when you don't have an SPF, it means whole world is allowed to send an email from your domain, which is not a good practice. And someone can impersonate your domain, spoof your domain with very easily. If you don't know your policy, what is configured, I would recommend you to go and check today to make sure you already have these three policies active, enabled, and authentication protocols are lined up together so that they work together and no one can impersonate your domain. Learn more. If you guys would like to learn more about email authentication, I have written a full article on itblogs.ca. Hands-on labs are also available on f11.ca. Thank you guys.